This is the final word story time. Story time 216. Jeff Lemon and Bharat Sundaresan with the show today. The show's brought to you by Maurice Blackburn, Australia's #1 plaintiff law firm. If you need a bit of help, especially with employment-related law, that's their thing. Looking out for the working people, the regular folks, the little guy, the medium-sized guy. I don't know, maybe even the big guys. If it's just like the big guys you run into down at the pub, hey, the big guy. You know, when you're a big guy, you get called big fella a lot. That I don't want to leave big fellas out. There may be some big fellas out there who need some assistance as well. Bharat, welcome to the show. It is the afternoon before the screening of your Australian story. This is the last time you will do a show with us before you become too famous and too cool, and you have to go and hang out with, I don't know, Osher Gunsberg or someone like that. I don't know, host the Arias, do some sort of shit. How do you feel? What's your plan? Do you have like a watch-along party? Is it like getting together for the final of the World Cup or something? How does Adelaide look on a day like this?
Look, first of all, let me just say in a loud and clear voice, whatever happens from here, I'll always be back on the final word. I'll always be back for the nerd pledges. I'll always be there hosting, always standing to Colo's right, never to his left. Whatever happens, I am not losing my position. I'm never, that's never going to happen. But no, I mean, it's kind of surreal, to be honest. Firstly, I had the publicist from ABC send me like a list of media commitments that I had for the day. So I've gone through half of them. I think there were a couple of TV appearances, 4 or 5 radios. I still have five more radio interviews to go. And it is kind of humbling, to be honest. Like, we're so used to talking about everybody else and, you know, being my haha self, which I still, you know me, I'll always be haha. But yeah, to talk about your life, and especially when they play, I mean, look, and the thing with the Australian story I've learned is they don't give you a raw cut. Like, so the subject can never see what is going to be the final episode. So I'll watch with everyone else for the first time this evening. But, you know, they play clips though. I'm sure they've sent clips to all these. So suddenly hearing your voice, my voice talking about doing drugs and drinking a lot and all of that, it is kind of, yeah, it's kind of strange. But no, I'm happy that it hopefully impacts a lot of people, and you know, a lot of people realize there are second chances for everyone. But it is like, yeah, so the watch along, it's just going to be Isha, me, the dogs, who I think whatever happens after today, I don't know about, like I said, you know me, my head can only grow to a point. It can't grow too big, but the dogs are going to make the most of it. They're going to get bragging rights everywhere because they're going to be featured a lot. So it's just going to be us, my cousin who, you know, Kaushik, and his family, my nieces who I talk about a lot. And so just the 6 of us, the dogs. The chickens, it'll be too late for them. They'll be in their coop.
Yep. You don't have a little second TV for the chickens to run out there.
Well, we've started spotting foxes here, and for some reason, and you know my dogs really well, they've just been ignoring the fox, like right outside on the front yard. And so, yeah, not really doing their job, but yes, it's...
I think dogs talk a big game, you know, like we've got rabbits everywhere here, and my dog just ignores them. He's like, whatever, that's just 6 rabbits on the back lawn. It's like, dude, you're like, at least have some self-respect.
Exactly.
Like, have some, you know, your sense of self. But yeah, you have to let everybody choose their own path. That's the lesson of your Australian story.
That is correct.
I'm guessing before I've even heard it. I did read the summary, so I think that gives you a reasonable idea of how the arc of the thing is going to go. So if anybody's hearing this before they've seen Australian Story, go and catch it, the Bharat Sundaresan story. But you're joining us now on Storytime 216. What an auspicious number, 216, because 216, Bharat, is the number of test wickets taken by Clarence Victor Grimmett.
Yes.
My favourite cricketer, my favourite player. Out of all of the history, all of the stories, and anyone who's listened to the show will know, and you may know that I currently own a set of his playing whites from the late 20s or early 30s. Haven't quite tracked down the provenance yet, but that number, like that was the first real excitement number for me when I started getting into cricket stats. It wasn't Bradman 99.94. It was Grimmett 216 and how relatively few test matches he got there in. Nobody had taken more than 200 wickets before him. Nobody had broken that barrier, and he did it faster than just about anyone. Even to this day, there are very few players with a higher wickets per match ratio because of the massive bags that he used to take. So I'm glad that, it's me and you on 216 day. This is an auspicious episode that I've been waiting for.
And we also visited his house, don't forget, you and me.
True.
This time last year, or just March last year. Isha also came. But
Yes.
I think Isha became a Clarrie Grimmett fan as well once she heard about the dog and everything else. So, no, that was quite a moment for all of us, the three of us, on a road trip, which we made basically to see Clarrie Grimmett's house. And yeah, it looked in good condition, didn't it? We did consider buying it, but maybe.
Yeah,
we
I'm still not sure if it was. I think it's still, maybe it is up for sale at some point. If anybody hears that it's on the market, let us know. We'll do some sort of crowdfunding situation.
Yeah,
we'll get everybody to chip in to buy the place on Fitzroy Street, is it, in Dunedin? So that was about 11 months ago that we were looking at Clarrie's, the house where he was born, not the house where he grew up, which is just around the corner on the adjoining street. But if I know anything, it's that you've got a couple of answers to do, and I suspect that either of them might take you a while. I don't know what you've come up with, but I think we should get into the numbers that we have to do today via the medium of a game that we like to play called Nerd Pledge! Nerd Pledge, the game that we play with nice people on the internet who fund this program. They send in a contribution, and they've done so in bigger and bigger numbers. We're up towards 850 people signed on now. We want to get to 1,009. We want to get to Pranav Dhanavade. That's our goal now. After you did such an excellent expose of that story on our show about 50, 60 episodes ago.
Yeah.
So if we can get to 1,009, we will venture into territory that nobody's ever reached before. So do get involved if you want to get on the show with a Nerd Pledge. So they send in the amount. They send in the amount of currency. They tailor that number so that it's a number that relates to cricket in some way. We have to figure out what the number means. Chris Wright is a new pledger. $2.40 in USD. There was no clue. It's just the number 240. So that could be 24. It could be 24,000. It could be, you could interpret it in any way you want. The field is open and you've got 20-something minutes to tell me what you think 240 might be.
Yeah, well, I might need 40 because I'm just warning you.
But need two lots of 40 minutes.
Yeah, probably, yeah. Because there are two elements to this. Firstly, 240, so my mind wandered everywhere, but it landed on a pretty famous test match, probably one of the most famous test matches of the modern era, or probably ever, considering it's still right up there, number one in the record books when it comes to the highest run chase. But 418 is the run chase, which is not close to 240. However, in that dramatic test match in Antigua, both teams, both Australia and West Indies, were tied on first innings total. So if this was the Sheffield Shield, or if this was the Ranji Trophy, or any other domestic competition, they would have got no first innings lead points. But they both ended up 240 all out. And
I forgot that it was level. So hang on. So Australia must have made 417 batting third.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Declared as well. So, no, they were bowled out. Sorry. Omari Banks, who I will come to, did play a big role in that. They were bowled out. Hayden and Langer both made significant hundreds. And, the run chase is like, you can break that test match down into so many bits, though, Jeff. There were so many things that happened in that test match. Firstly, going into it, Australia were trying to break West Indies' record of not having been clean swept at that point in a series. They had never done it in the West Indies either. So they'd already won the series. This was the last test. And so on day one, Jermaine Lawson takes 7 for 78, runs through Australia, bowls them out for 240. And pretty much by day 3, he's been reported for chucking. So his action's been questioned during a test match, unlike the Kuhnemann situation.
Shipped him straight off to Perth.
They should have, right? And probably he was, because he didn't bowl in the second innings, and they said back strain. So interesting, because the rules at that point were you could still bowl till I I think you could be tested. So it was strange. So he could have bowled in the second innings, but he did not. He had been reported. So 7 for 78. And Jermaine Lawson had a couple of dreamy spells. I think there was a crazy one-day spell against Bangladesh as well. But then his career never really took off once his action got questioned. So
Is that the only 7 for in the first innings where a player didn't bowl an over in the second innings?
You would think so. Yeah, could well be. Again, like I said, this game had so many incidents. So that happens.
It's very... There's a Dera Ismail Khan bit about that with the biggest ever loss in first-class cricket, where I'm pretty sure one of the bowlers who did take 6 or 7 in the first innings then didn't bowl in the second because they cleaned them up so quickly.
I mean, most of those kids who bowled to Pranav Danawade never bowled again. So, again, ever in their life. Though that little kid, that my favorite, I'm sure maybe he plays the IPL. I don't know. I should go find out. But
where are they now? How long ago was it now? When did that happen?
9 years ago. Actually, you know what?
So 10 years. Wait for the 10-year anniversary.
Next year, we'll be at the T20 World Cup.
Go and make a documentary.
Yes, I will. Next year, we should do that. Yeah, T20 World Cup, we'll be there.
That's our project. If anyone steals that project, we'll know that you stole it.
Yes, from us, because nobody else knows about that one child in particular.
Who else is going to have that idea, though?
That is correct. Well, hopefully nobody does. But yeah, so Jermaine Lawson happens on day one. So Australia get bowled out. And already there's a lot of argy-bargy in this test match. So Steve Waugh, is playing his last test in the Caribbean, has a bit of a run-in with Brian Lara on day 2 because Brian Lara, Australia convinced he's out, but he's given not out, and Steve Waugh gets stuck into Brian Lara. He starts playing a lot of shots, and then Australia get bowled out. And I think this is also a sign of what Australia thought of that Antigua pitch, because this was probably, I have to go and check, but I can't think of too many scenarios back then where Australia played 5 specialist bowlers. So Adam Gilchrist is batting 6. So they had
Bickle
4
at 7. It's the Bickle
at
7.
Bickle at 7 game. Yes, it's the Bickle at 7 game.
It came up for some reason last week.
Oh, right. Oh, there you go. Yeah. So Stuart McGill bowling spin, the only specialist spinner. So they had Bickle, Gillespie, McGrath and Lee, I think. Yes, that's correct. Yeah, Brett Lee. So 4-prong pace attack, and then they bowl out West Indies for 240, and then Australia bat, and then the Langer Hayden partnership. They put on well over 200 runs. I think 218 or 219. But then there is a bit of a collapse, and this is where Omari Banks and Mervyn Dillon, who had a pretty awful series till that point, do well. And Omari Banks playing his second test, by the way. So unbeaten in the first innings, 16 not out, has a last wicket partnership, which takes West Indies to par with Australia. Takes 2 big wickets. I think Adam Gilchrist and Martin Love in back-to-back overs or in 3 overs in one spell. Anyway, to break the back, because at that point, Australia could well have just powered on. I mean, I still think they would have backed themselves to win after having set 418. But anyway, so they play a role. Then Australia get bowled out. And then by the end of that day, I think, by that day, West Indies to start strongly. They none for 40 odd. But then they lose 3 wickets. They're 3 for 74. And on day 4, and we often forget that this happened in this test match, is the infamous Glenn McGrath Ramnaresh Sarwan confrontation. The one where
that's this one. Yeah.
This one. Like it happened in the world record chase while the run chase was on. And at this point, Sarwan had been playing test cricket for 3 years, I think. He developed this reputation of being flashy. He'd made 1 test 100, and Tony Cozier and the likes were like, is that the best he can do? Will he ever make 100 against, he'd made that against Bangladesh in one of their earliest test matches. So they were like, will he make 100 against a big team? And it happens in this game after he has the showdown with Glenn McGrath. And so he makes 100. And Chandra Paul makes 100 as well. But then West Indies lose wickets and Ridley Jacobs is given out. But then replays show that it did not hit his glove, but it hit his forearm. The crowd starts throwing bottles onto the field, debris. Glenn McGrath is asked to move from fine leg because the crowd are going after him. So all this drama is happening, and then in walks Omari Banks once again, just playing his second test. West Indies still need 130 at this point after the big Chanderpaul Sarwan partnership, and Lara has made 65 the previous day and got out to Stuart McGill. And so they go into the last day needing, I think they still needed a few runs, like around 70 or maybe around that, or less, maybe 50. And Chanderpaul gets out first ball to Brett Lee. And then Omari Banks is joined by the great Wasbur Drakes, one of the greatest handshakes I've ever experienced in my life, by the way. So Wasbur Drakes joins Omari Banks, and they see them home in one of the great moments in Test history and West Indies history. And the reason I kind of went breathless through that bit of the answer is now we come to Omari Banks. And of the many crazy things I've done in my life, Jeff, and you know about most of them, like becoming a wrestling heel last year in the ring with Eric Bischoff and Bret Hart. The one thing I don't speak about much is when I cosplayed as a music promoter in 2017 in India, or 2018 is when it happened. But it involved Omari Banks. So the story goes that in 2017, I was in the West Indies when I did the famous Patrick Patterson story. But I did a few others as well. Franklin Rose was another one. And Omari Banks, by this time, so Omari Banks' father is considered one of the godfathers of reggae music, Banky Banks. And Omari himself was a very talented, Banky Banks, very talented musician.
It really went all out on that one, didn't they?
Yeah,
really,
pretty much. Yeah.
Australian levels of nicknaming caliber there.
Well, it's also like my friend who I also met on that tour, who led me to Patrick Patterson, the great Fred Locks, who had dreadlocks. So also one of the, look up Fred Locks, one of the greatest musicians of in that generation. Anyway, so Omari had a music pedigree growing up as well, but he never really embraced the Rasta in him till the time he quit cricket. And also about Omari Banks, before I come to the interview, in 2003...
Which island was he from?
Anguilla. So the first cricketer to ever come from Anguilla. I think the only cricketer still to come from, Test cricketer from Anguilla. In 2003, Jeff, there were 3 nominees for the Wisden Young Cricketer of the Year. Graham Smith, Jimmy Anderson, and Omari Banks. So you're talking proper pedigree here. Okay. And in his second test, makes 47, bowling beautiful off spin, tall, lanky, has led West Indies to his run chase. But his career really never took off after that. He played only 10 tests. But I think the music played a huge role. So anyway, 2017, I interview him in Jamaica. I think he was there for a Legends game, just playing some music. He was still in his 30s. So I interviewed him, and we really hit it off. So by this point, he's got his dreadlocks and he's embraced his father's lineage. And I just, as we were parting ways, I said, "Oh, you should come and do a show in India." He was like, "Oh, that's a great idea. Maybe during the," I said, "Maybe during the IPL." And he goes, "That's a very good idea. Can you help me out?" And me, Jeff, I said, yeah, of course I can help you out. I'll organize it for you. Not realizing that he'll never follow up on it. And then we parted ways. We promised to stay in touch. 6 months later, I get an email from him and his agent saying, "Hey, so you had told Omari that you'll organize some shows for him in India, and so we want to reach out to you." And they started sending me all his new singles, and they sending me all these emails saying we want to launch this new song about his island of Anguilla. And I'm going, yeah. I'm thinking, oh my God, what do I do now? And so Bharat did what Bharat does. He went to Google. He said, all right. And I really did not know one who would help me with this. So I just started Googling random PR agencies in Mumbai, picked one absolutely at random who had no idea about reggae music or Omari Banks or Banky Banks or much about the Caribbean. They were sort of cricket fans. I said, this great West Indies cricketer is coming here and we have to organize this. So I get together with
Legends.
them.
He was playing in a Legends league. He must have been great.
And he's part of that world record run chase, so don't forget. Sure. And in 2018 in the IPL, I actually pulled it off. There were 2 shows, one in Pune, which coincided with Punjab and Chennai. So I made sure Chris Gale, Dwayne Bravo, and Murali Vijay also joined. But Dwayne Bravo and Chris Gale, I picked them up.
Murali Vijay was not required, but he came.
He came. But, he just told me, "Oh, I love reggae music." Right. I was like, cool. So I went, I picked...
It's like at Adelaide 2014 when Kohli makes the twin tons. It's like Murali Vijay was also there.
Also there. It was pretty much that. So you had Chris Gale, Dwayne Bravo, Murali Vijay and me in one car. And I'd organize everything. I'd fix the venue. I'd like with this PR agency who, in Omari's head, were like the greatest PR agency ever. And little did he know. I think I did tell him, confess later. So he flies down. So we do this show in Pune. It's a big hit. He launches his single. Bravo is there. Gail is there, and he's not content. I even found like a reggae band in India, like I think the Reggae Rajas they were called. They'd been doing the rounds for a long time. Introduced them, and we had a show in Bombay at the reggae club in Bandra. Well, interesting. I think it was called Rasta something. Anyway, Dad and Sammy came to that one, and yeah, it was a great week when I genuinely became a music promoter, and I was setting up interviews for Omari Banks and meeting like producers and other talent, and to the extent people got wind of it. And a year later, no, that same year, Marlon Samuels came to India with the West Indies team, and then he said he was trying to break into a music career at that point. So then I had to do the same for him. That didn't really click, but so my music promoter career was short-lived, but we did pull off 2 great shows. And Omari Banks, who has in the New York Times, I was reading this yesterday, that I must have written it back then, was referred to as the perfect blend between Bob Marley and Bob Dylan, so of our generation. So he is a talented musician. You should go check him out. But not only did he lead West Indies to that famous run chase, but he also trusted me in launching a single in India, which I don't know how, but we pulled it off.
I assume this was all in the documentary, right? I assume you spent a fair bit of time on Australian Story.
I think this part of me, yeah, maybe that's for part 2. So, yeah, look, I've done a few things in my life, Jeff, and like, right. Yeah, so I kept my word to him, though not in the way he thought I would, but, well, we pulled it off.
You followed through. You had the commitment. I think it's just sad that you missed the boat to be involved with the Bravo champion era from 2016. You were a little bit too late, because that was probably the greatest West Indies cricket to popular music crossover, the most successful, the only name check for Samuel Badri, probably in music. Everybody knows that Badri's a champion.
He is. You knew that?
What the list, the champion list: Badri, Gale, Obama. I can't remember who
Serena.
Else is on there. Serena, yeah, the big four.
The big four. And funny you should bring that up. So Bravo did attend the Pune show, right? So he kind of knew me as a journalist, but probably after attending that show, he assumed that I'm a music promoter as well, because for at least like a few years after that, wherever we met, he would always talk to me about his music, and he was launching this, and I would check whether there was a concert coming up that I had organized, and like I would always like pretend like I'd just been busy to like organize anything, but like he did believe for a while that I was a journalist come music promoter, which I was for the space of 1 week.
For that period of time.
Yeah, and you can check out Omari Banks launching his video on YouTube. I'm sure it's somewhere. It's there somewhere. You might find me on stage as well, like jumping up and down with him.
You only need to do something once to be able to say that you've done it.
Correct.
There's a historical precedent with being too fond of one's horse, where that sort of theory is explained. So if you've done it, if you've promoted not just 1 but 2 successful music shows. So you got a crowd in.
Oh yeah, it was a big crowd, and obviously the first one had Gail and Bravo, so Bravo did perform the champion song. It was still quite fresh 2 years on, so it was a huge crowd, and people weren't sure who I was, but they were quite intrigued by this long-haired Indian guy who was promoting music in Pune. But Bombay was like a closed venue, but it's still it was a pretty decent crowd. In fact, we had some other cricketers as well. My cousin might have popped up in Bombay, I'm pretty sure, that alongside Dad and Sammy. And S. Badrinath was there. I think wasn't he on Storytime recently?
Was he? Yes.
He was.
We did a Badrinath story not long ago about why he didn't play more for India.
Oh, there you go.
Be a bit of a theme today. So if we loop it all back to the 2003 game,
yes.
I remember this happening where that result felt really significant because West Indies had been so embarrassed when they came to Australia in 2001
Correct.
got whitewashed in Australia, and that Australian team is in the middle of its all-conquering ways, and it's just expected to belt everybody. And so it wasn't just chasing 400, which hasn't happened that often. I think, top of my head, I think there have been six 400 run chases.
It was 3 at that point. Maybe there have been more.
At that point. Been a few more. There's India, there's the Gavaskar one, the 404, is it? There's Bradman 406. There's South Africa in Perth with the 414.
That's right. Yeah, the 14 one. Yeah.
There's and there's the 418. Maybe it is only those 4.
I think it's just those 4. Yeah.
The ones
there have been a lot of 380s and 370s in recent times, but just a matter of
time. There've been a
though.
few.
Yeah.
But even so, sort of chases above 350 are, I think there's only about 40 of those all up. So, the idea that you could set the world record chase for two teams with such disparity between them in terms of quality and form line, the idea that West Indies would ever be able to come close was fanciful. But they have that, that Antigua pitch, you have those lower first inning scores, but it was still pretty nice for batting. That's where Lara made his 375 and his 400. Yep. So the fact that it worked, though, I just remember being absolutely astounded by it. I remember following that chase and urging. I wanted West Indies to get it because I like the historical, I like the unlikely result. And there was that point where sort of Sarwan and Chanderpaul both get out, and you're going, now it's going to fall over. You're always expecting it to fall over the whole way through. It was like there will reach a point where this tips away, and then they got there. What, eight down? Is it?
Yeah. Banks and Drakes. Yeah, with Dillon and Lawson to come. That's right. Yeah. So it's 7 down. That would be then. Yeah, 7 down. So 3. Yeah, correct. 7 down. Yeah.
So one of those extremely memorable matches, and that is 240 for Chris Wright. And congratulations, you have come in minutes under the point in time where we needed to tell that story in the first half hour. I'm impressed.
I'm very impressed.
I'm surprised you've turned over a new leaf. So we'll grab a break now. I will tell you before that happens, if you're anybody needing to get a VPN, we have the way for you to do that. NordVPN are the company that we've been working with so that we can get people discounts, we can get them signed up so that it's cheap over the course of a couple of years, where it's a few bucks a month. My one is coming up for renewal in 30 days. I just got the email, and I will happily renew it, even though they sponsor the show. I don't care, because, I want to be part of supporting the people who support us. Mostly it's most relevantly for sports and entertainment, so that you can access the streams that you have, the subscriptions you have, no matter where you are in the world, whatever country you're in. Did you have any VPN requirements in Sri Lanka? If you were in Sri Lanka now, you wouldn't be able to watch Australian Story unless
that is correct. Yeah, or if I had gone to the Champions Trophy, there are a few Australian cricketers who are probably using that very VPN to watch the Australian Story. I know a couple for sure will be tuning in. So so they'll be using it. If I was there, I would be using it to watch the AFL simulation games, which I did go and watch one of them live, the Crows and Port. I've become one of those, Jeff. I know they said never go watch footy in summer, but with the sun on my back in Mount Barker, I saw the Crows beat Port. So that was good fun.
Okay. Now you've really gone down the rabbit hole. NordVPN.com/TFW. That's where you get the discounts. You get a 30-day money-back guarantee if you don't like the service anyway, which you won't need. You'll be fine. Let's take a break. We'll be back in a second. It's the final word. It's story time 216 show. Also brought to you by Maurice Blackburn, who have asked us to pass on the message about superannuation insurance. That's something where often your super comes with insurance for death or disability payments, things like that, if you're injured while working or while you've got that cover. And sometimes insurers can be complicated to deal with. Sometimes they're less keen on paying out the policies than perhaps they should be. And sometimes you need to get some people involved who know their way around the legal system and know how to make sure that that gets expedited. So if you do, that's an area that Maurice Blackburn specialise in particularly. Look them up, pop them into the old Google machine, see if you can get some sense out of it. Maurice Blackburn, they're the ones to contact if you need assistance. Right, number Number 2, Matt Brown sent in a pledge, Bharat, which was initially just the default, the flat $2 US, which doesn't indicate a nerd pledge, but then followed up with a message to say there is a nerd pledge. The number is 3.14. And it is, said Matt, to honour the correct use of the term exponentially by me in season 16, episode 23. I can't remember the context in which I was talking about exponential things, but presumably I explained it correctly.
You would have.
Matt says it's a free hit as long as you can work mathematics into the answer somewhere. So,
Okay.
3.14, what does 3.14 tell me? It tells me pi.
Yes.
3.1415, maybe, something.
Yeah, 157.
157, yeah, good.
I just wanted to add a decimal to it and sound smarter than you.
Okay, so we've got
I
like
think that's what it is.
5 decimal. We've got pi to 5 decimal places. We're really nailing this. Now, mathematically speaking, I'm reliably informed that pi is a real, transcendental, irrational constant. And just off the bat, I love that description. I don't know what it means. I don't understand mathematics. But if someone described you, and they could describe you as a real, transcendental, irrational constant, it kind of works. You are real. You're authentic. You're transcendental. You transcend the mundane, the everyday. You're irrational. It doesn't make sense that you exist, but you do. But you're always there. You're a constant.
I'm there. Yeah.
You, maybe Glenn Maxwell's batting.
Yes.
These are things that could be described as real, transcendental, irrational constants.
Wow. Yeah, that's true. Me and Glenn Maxwell's batting do go hand in hand if you think about it. Yeah. That's a good point.
They've definitely spent enough time together. So, and the fact that it still works, the fact that Maxie's still out there doing what he did against England the other night, smoking the bowling late in an innings and still doing it all of those years after the debut. It says that there is that constancy. So pi is basically the basis of the letter P, or what becomes the letter P based on the Greek alphabet. The algebraic version, it is taken to represent the ratio of a circle's diameter in relation to its circumference. It can be calculated to an infinite number of decimal points. International Pi Day is March the 14th, so 3/14. Which is the day before the Ides of March, which is when Julius Caesar was assassinated, which we talked about on the last story time.
Oh, really?
So we've gone from March 15th to March 14th.
There you go.
That's Pi Day. But that has to be an American date format because there's no 31st of April. If there was a 31/4, then we could do it in the date format that makes sense, which is the day first. And then, clearly we've got to sort this stuff out. Get rid of Fahrenheit, sort out the date formats,
Seriously.
and then, as we've said on the show, we as Australians have to concede. We've got the cricket scoring backwards. We should do it the other way.
Wow.
There's a point that everybody has to concede something,
Big
right?
compromise, though. Just when I've gotten used to it, don't make me go back. Don't make me go back to where I came from in terms of scoring.
Every other country you're in, you have to do it the other way. So surely it would be easier if we're the holdouts. We're the problem here.
That is
I'm the
correct.
problem. It's me. So in a cricket context, if we're talking Pi, the South African radio commentator Michael Abramson, who I don't know if you've crossed paths with, but he's certainly worked on the ABC some years ago. Adam was working with him in 2018. So we met him on the Sandpaper Tour. He also, as well as being a sports commentator, has a sideline as what he calls a memory expert. So he does sort of displays of mental acuity. He does live shows where and he reads people. He's one of those. He's able to sort of decipher what people are thinking by looking at them, that kind of stuff. One of the things he does is memorize decimals of pi. And he's gradually been increasing the number of decimals of pi that he could memorize, which culminated a couple of years ago in a display in which he broke the world record for the fastest reciting from memory of the first 2,000 decimals of pi.
Oh, my God.
Now, he did this in 5 minutes and 12 seconds to read out 2,000 numbers.
Wow.
The other cricket link is that the invigilator, or one of them, checking his numbers live, sitting in the room with him, running them off manually on a printed sheet, was Andrew Sampson, the great cricket statistician. So, South African stats.
Yeah.
Michael Abramson is also a trained statistician in an academic
sense. I'm not surprised.
So he has to do this blindfolded so that nobody can cue him as to whether he's correct about a number or not. He has to say the numbers audibly so that the tape can be cross-checked later to make sure that he's satisfied the requirements. The speed that he did it at means reading about 6 digits per second across 5.5 minutes. And
okay.
Yep. So like at a decipherable speed, but it's still pretty quick. 5, 6, yeah. And if he makes a single mistake, the whole thing is void. You can't go back and say, "Oh, sorry, I meant 4, but I said 5." So as soon as there's a mistake, it's over. It's sudden death.
Wow.
And he did it. I mean, he did it in just over 5 minutes, which is absurd. So Pi-related things. As far as circles go and working out the circumference of circles, men's international cricket grounds have to have boundaries between 59 and 82 metres. Women's can be between 55 and 64. So they can be a little smaller on the minimum, but the bigger women's grounds could still be bigger than the smaller men's grounds. But usually they're irregular, but there are a few circles in the world. It's legit to have a cricket ground that is a perfect circle. You could do that rather than an oval. I think Dubai is pretty circular from memory.
Yeah.
Sports City. I reckon the Rose Bowl, whatever they call it now, is pretty circular in Southampton, but there may be others. So Pi. This is the thread that I went down when I was looking at Pi-related cricket things.
Very
and so
good.
eventually I came to this point, Bharat, where I thought, if we're talking about Pi, I want to talk about a fellow called Percival Ian Peries, who was latterly the president of the Board of Cricket Control for Sri Lanka, when it still had the old name before it became Sri Lanka Cricket, SLC. Everybody got so boring with their administrative names.
I know,
so
right?
his
Not the
his
BCCI.
initials- No, they've stuck with it. It's one thing. It's one thing, maybe the one thing that I respect them for is they're like, no, we like our crusty old name and we will remain the Board for Control of Cricket in India. And the one thing they do is control it.
That is correct.
Definitely does what it says on the tin. So this seemed like a good option if I've got somebody whose initials were PI and whose last name also begins with PI and who was uniformly, nobody called him Percy, nobody called him Ian. He was addressed as PI through his life. He was not a private investigator, but he is Pi. So PI was a player himself to some level, did play first-class cricket to a point, very posh Sri Lankan background. You can, the anglicised names are a giveaway there. Born in 1933. So he's attending school through World War II when Ceylon, as it is then, is being bombed by the Japanese and so on. He plays for the St Thomas College First 11 for 4 years. Is that where you went to play your game in Sri Lanka? Was it?
No, we went to Richmond, and the other one was at the MCC that they built. But St Thomas is part of that big school rivalry. Yeah. Right.
So there's St Thomas College and there's Royal College, and they're the crosstown rivals. Yeah. They're the Mighty Ducks and the Hawks of Sri Lankan cricket, if you will. So PI, his school highlight is a game where he makes 123 and takes 6 for against Royal College. His school is also the school of Frederick Desaram, whose story we've talked about on Storytime before, who's the cricketer who went to Oxford and was a very stylish and famous cricketer in Sri Lanka at the time, and then eventually ended up leading a coup against the government and winding up in jail for a fair while. So he's about a generation older. So Desaram goes to Oxford in the early 30s, around the time that PI is born, and PI will later go to Cambridge in the 1950s. But before that happens, Frederick Desaram is PI's national captain. So this is this story just winds together. So at just past the age of 20, PI wins a cap to play for Ceylon, as they are then, in 1953, before the Sri Lanka days. It's not a first-class match. It's a single-day game, but it's against the touring Australian team, captained by Lindsay Hassett. So he's playing against Keith Miller, Richie Benaud, Ray Lindwall. Opens the bowling, bowls Arthur Morris, which is a pretty good get. Doesn't get a chance to bat in this one-day game, but that's sort of his first match of real significance. He started at school as a batter, ends up more as a seamer, which is not a great option if you're in Sri Lanka, but he's going to England and he's going to go and bowl a lot in England where that sort of thing, bowling, medium pace seam is going to stand you in better stead. So he ends up with 101 first-class wickets from 44 matches, averages 34 with the ball. Not the greatest player going around, but, does his bit. And plays mostly for Cambridge. Most of those 44 games are in England for Cambridge or sort of associated 11s. Yeah. He plays against a couple of showpiece 11s, one organised by Ted Dexter, one organised by Douglas Jardine. He takes 5 for 44 against the Jardine lot, so take that, Doug. And towards the end of his first-class career goes for 11 or 12 years. Towards the end of that, he gets to play some official first-class matches for Ceylon against international teams. So there's a couple of teams in 1964 that beat Pakistan A and an A team twice, and that leads a couple of years later to a full-strength Pakistan team coming to play an unofficial test series. They play 3 matches. They're full 5 days, so you don't often see 5-day first-class cricket. But that does happen in this case. They're not recognised as tests, but it's sort of marking Ceylon's rise as a cricketing power. They get belted. They're beaten twice by an innings, once by 10 wickets. Mushtaq Mohammed is there scoring just a lot of runs. And PI's bowling gets smashed up, basically. But he does top score in one of the innings down the order, makes 48. And so fairly understandably, the next year, 1967, he's pretty pissed off when he gets carted to bat at number 11 against a touring West Indies side. He's playing for Ceylon, and this is a real deal West Indies side. Clive Lloyd's there, Garfield Sobers is there, Derek Murray, Seymour Nurse, Wes Hall, Lance Gibbs.
Oh, proper.
And batting at 11, coming in at 290 for 9, he puts on a partnership of 110 for the last wicket because he's pissed. There's a quote from him. He says, "I was angry with the captain, the selectors, and everybody else." He says, "That's how I scored 46 not out, fueled by cold fury."
Wow, that's one of the greatest quotes ever in cricket history.
So he gives it a whack, hits a 6 in there, hits a few 4s in there. The number 10 makes a bunch as well. It gets him to 400, and it helps him draw the game, which is a pretty big deal, really. So Sobers, Lloyd, Basil Butcher all make hundreds, but they draw this match, Ceylon, against this West Indies team. PI gets Basil Butcher out eventually after his century and gets Wes Hall out, but does get smacked about for those 2 wickets. So he ends up playing 6 first-class matches officially for Ceylon, taking 8 wickets at 70, which rather blows out his career record, which is a fair bit better than that. But being a medium-pace seamer in Sri Lanka, not that easy. Yeah. Anyway, doesn't really matter for PI because he's from a rich family. He's influential. They've got a huge family company. I think it's called the Richard Peries Company. I think it still exists now as a big conglomerate. But it was basically a rubber plantation company initially and made a lot of wealth out of being rubber producers in Ceylon. And so, of course, being from a rich family, he goes into cricket administration, president of the National Board at times. He's president of the Ceylonese Sports Club as well, the SCC, that famous ground in Colombo, but that also operates as a club where he plays for a long time. And in 1999, when he's 66 years old, he's celebrating the club's century of existence, and he gives a speech insisting that this is not a bastion of privilege for the 2 richest schools in Colombo. This insistence is a little bit undermined by the reporting on the speech, where, which is quite generously written up in quite full detail about what the speech is about. But it ends with this final paragraph. Quote, "The banquet, which was exclusively for members, was preceded by a preliminary time of fellowship over cocktails at the atrium lobby, where members drawn from the professions of the medical, legal, business, and cricketers past and present, along with the fairer sex lending much colour, indulged in harmless chatter amidst the clinking of glasses." So just to recap, we've got doctors, lawyers, business people, cricketers, and women. The 5 genders, the 5 categories, because obviously they can't be those things. But according to this report, it's important they were there to look nice.
Very much.
That's the main thing. So this is in 1999, which I suppose Lords still hadn't admitted women. They admitted women in 99, didn't they?
They did. I always like. It's funny. I was just telling everyone who was with me, the Australian media that is in Sri Lanka now, about how Sri Lanka was always the more progressive country. Like when you compare the others in South Asia, and progressive, and also freer when it came to things which were not taboo as they are in India and definitely in Pakistan. So that surprises me, that kind of reporting. But if you do read newspapers in Sri Lanka, they do have a sense of they love the old British style of writing, though. So probably it had to do with that. And even I mean, you can see it in South India as well. I remember, I won't name him, but you might not have met him. It was this very senior Indian journalist from Tamil Nadu when I was a much younger journalist. He walked up to me and said, like, so where are all the dames? Which was probably the last time anyone had referred to women as dames was when the Raj was still on. It was interesting. So I think there is a penchant for all of that in southern India and in Sri Lanka. So maybe I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt.
I think that probably maybe the conservatism is its own branch in that kind of anglicised, of English influenced sector of society, perhaps. So that was Pi, who lasted until relatively recently. I think he died in 2016, maybe something that. In his 80s anyway, by the time he passed away. One last thing, I was also looking to see if I could find any cricketer at any level with a surname that was just Pi, like just Pi. And I found one, although cricketer might need to come with an asterisk. So, and this is relevant to the part of the world where I've been living recently. In Spain, in Valencia, there's a town by the sea called La Alfas del Pi, spelled P-I.
P-I.
So Alfas is not alphas, it's Alfas spelled with an F, not with a PH. So they have a team called Sporting Alfas, which is not about sporting alphas. It's not like a bunch of dudes trying to tell themselves that they're alpha males. It is a sporting team from Alfas in that way that they have like Sporting Lisbon and so on. Alfas apparently means a fertile field. And a pine tree in Spanish, this is what it confused me, is pino. But in Valencian specifically, you can just call it pi, like the first part. So pi is the pine tree. And apparently there's a symbolic pine tree planted in the middle of this town when they got their independence some hundreds of years ago. Now, it's on the beach. It's near Benidorm, so it means it's very overpopulated by Brits and Scandinavians and whatnot who go to live in Spain near the beach. So there are cricket teams because of the British bit. And in 2011, there's a team called the Nomads Club of Spain that play a series against the local team, Sporting Alfas. And listed in the 11 for the first match out of 4 is a player with the initials AF and the last name P, just Pi. So AF Pi, as it is in my head, where I'm looking for this Pi player. So to my thinking, I think, well, this person must be Valencian, right? If Pi is the local name, this must be a local player. Everybody else has a British name in these 11s. They're Brockton, Cooper, Robinson, whatever. There's an amazing name actually in Charles Peerless. Hello, I'm Charles Peerless, the greatest possible Charles. Which does sound a bit royal family. But amongst all of these, there is this one Valencian-sounding name, AF Pi, for Sporting Alfas. The problem is the Nomads make 314. The chase is 315 in 40 overs. They get bowled out at the end of their innings, Sporting Alfas, and AF Pi, listed at 11, is recorded on the scorecard, Bharat, as absent. Now, what happened? Was there an injury in the field? Did AF Pi not rock up? Was this like a token inclusion where they needed an 11th player, so they roped in a random local Valencian to put their name on the scorecard, and then that person didn't show up? Game 2 is a washout. Games 3 and 4, AF Pi is nowhere to be seen, not on the scorecard. So only got listed to play in this one game and then wasn't there, then didn't show. Like one of the Hearn brothers on his only first class match that we talked about a few weeks ago. So what happened to AF Pi or AFP in 2011? I want to know. March 11th, almost the Ides of March again.
Oh, wow.
What is the answer to this question? Somebody must know somebody from the Nomads Club or Sporting Alphas from 2011 who can get in touch and solve this very pressing mystery for me. That's what I want to know.
Yeah, maybe he just got upset that the other team made 314, which is Pi, right? 3.14. Maybe he just,
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
I didn't even notice that.
Oh, I thought you did.
Good save from you right at the end. That's the best bit.
That is it. That was it. I knew you were building up towards that. Like, there you go. Someone called Pi played in a game where 314 was made in the opposition, and he refused to come out to bat. Yeah.
He refused to add to it. Yeah,
yes,
just
that's the thing.
Had to leave it there.
Yeah.
Although they were chasing. Anyway, Matt Brown, that's my mathematical number for you.
Wow.
I hope that it hit the spot. And Bharat, you have Andy Shaw, who has sent through $2.19. That's in AUD. Andy says, this is a number that I see on the honours board, and it takes me back to the summer when I was learning to drive. The instructor was a local club cricketer, and if the cricket was on the radio, it would be the soundtrack for the lesson. 219. What have you got?
Look, I have seen a few people, and it kind of annoys me, take driving lessons at night. And you know the roads around the Adelaide Hills that we have to take Green Hill Road to go down. They're very narrow. But there are a few who I have seen. But they seem more like private lessons. So I'm going to say the actual lessons. And clearly, our friend here did not know his driving instructor, who he knew of as a club cricketer. That's it. So I'm assuming this was like a proper paid for driving lesson, which by the way you end up taking anyway as a migrant, even though you have a driving lesson. But
sure,
that is a story for another day. So I'm going to assume
it's reasonable to say that driving in India and driving in Australia are different things.
That is correct. Yeah,
they have a different set of requirements.
You would think so.
I don't think that's an unreasonable observation.
No, fair enough. Yes, yeah. But I had driven for 5 years at that point. But again, don't draw. Sure. Let's not get dragged into that. But it's a pet peeve. So I assume that he was taking driving lessons during the day, and it could have been morning, could have been evening, because if he was listening to the cricket commentary and something significant happened which involved the numbers 219, it has to be probably my favorite test innings as a child, because my favorite batter anyway growing up, Jeff, was Michael Slater. I think I loved a lot of things about Australia, the blue sky, the fact that Bill Lawry always spoke about people putting their washing out during odd times of the day because he would want to tell them about the wickets, or that was his lead up to all the wickets package, right? And Michael Slater, not just the way he batted, not just the way he kissed his badge, not just the way he was high on energy, but also the way he made the most of that stump mic. Because people talk about the stump mic that Channel 9 used to use and the whole that used to happen when the stumps would be broken. But when Michael Slater was batting, and I think he's the only batter I remember, when the way he used to move his feet around the crease, you could hear the whole even when he used to like square cut the ball. And that's been etched in my head. Just on Michael Slater, if you ever see Josh Inglis fielding, and I said this to Adam on commentary, on the field, like in his whites with the floppy hat, he moves just like Michael Slater. That's the next time you see Inglis field, because I have a strong feeling he'll be playing in that World Test Championship final as a batter. So, but yeah, so
he doesn't scream at Rahul Dravid as much, though.
I don't think he will. I don't think he'll scream at anyone. Even if he does, it won't sound Australian, because that Northern English accent is quite strong when he gets a little excited. I've noticed,
right.
Like he was.
So there's got to be a score, right? Because it's honours board.
Yeah, so honours board.
The number that I see on the honours board, it has to be.
It has to be. So maybe
no one's on the honours board for 2 for 19.
No, not at all. 2 for 19 wouldn't get. Maybe some T20 league. I don't know. Maybe it is possible in T10. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, Abu Dhabi T10.
Yeah, it's possible.
7 stumpings in the innings.
Well, anything can happen.
I'm just to clarify this. Are you when you're talking about driving at night? Are you, because the first thing I thought was Mark Taylor. I thought 219.
Yes,
Taylor in 89.
That's what you mean. That's what I mean. That's the other significant 219 in modern day Australian history, and
Because that's in England, so it would have been.
it would have been
radio
very
at
late at night.
nighttime?
Yeah, unless our friend is from the Adelaide Hills and was one of those who's taking private lessons here,
At
then
1
I
a.m..
apologize, and you should not have been doing that. You should be apologizing to me instead.
Yeah, for taking like 87 minutes to drive down the hill.
Exactly, yeah, and it's not safe. But yeah, that's exactly what I was going with. So Mark Taylor could not be Mark Taylor, I thought I will rule him out, and instead, because I just love talking about Michael Slater, I thought I'll bring up 219, and what a test match it was. So many things, again, much like the 418 I spoke about earlier, a lot of things happened here. Obviously, it was famous for the debuts of Ricky Ponting and Stuart Law.
Oh, yeah.
It was famous for Keza Hyatt and the LBW.
The saw-off.
Yes, exactly. Even though Ponting, I read, did admit to have got an outside edge to the first ball, and he apparently was... Eventually, he was like, okay, fine. I got the bad decision, but it all got balanced out. So, yeah, it's... So 219, Michael Slater, in a series which is remembered for all the wrong reasons, because that's the Muthaiya Muralidharan series, and Daryl Hare had not happened yet. It was about to happen in a few days' time, because this was just before Boxing Day. And this was Michael Slater at his absolute peak, wasn't it? He'd just made his debut 2 years earlier, smashed England around. He'd, won himself over. And I don't know, I'm sure if little Bharat was getting excited by Michael Slater sitting in Mumbai in Ghatkopar, I'm sure little Jeff was a fan of Michael Slater as well. I mean, how could you not be a youngster and not fall in love with the way Michael Slater played his cricket, especially during that phase with the way he batted? Was he one of your...
Well, he was. I mean, obviously, I liked the verve. I find it really hard to, like, these days, because it's like that story's ended up in such a horrendous way. I find it hard to feel much enjoyment about that. It does affect the way I see it.
Yeah, very much so.
So it's ended up. He's ended up being a player that I don't think of with any fondness because of
for sure,
the way things have panned out after his playing career and some of the pretty appalling things that he's reported to have done. It's hard to... I know people always have this argument about separating people from
art
their
and the
individual
artist,
feats, but it's something that I don't very much find myself able to do and don't particularly want to do.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, I completely understand, because we have that in wrestling as well. There's some pretty crazy examples of that, some very extreme examples, which I won't mention, where, again, like now when you go back and watch, and it's happened in sport as well, like so many in sport, like, so it is, so which is why I mentioned young Bharat and young Jeff, because, back then, like, when we were just little kids watching Michael Slater play cricket, it was quite exciting. Yeah, there was innocence there, but
I guess it didn't make much sense what players I was into. Like, I quite liked some of the more grinding play. Like, I really liked watching Steve Waugh play, who was not the most exciting player. I enjoyed watching Steve Waugh much more than I enjoyed watching Ponting, whereas Ponting was objectively a much more interesting player to watch and yet somehow I didn't. I enjoyed watching Langer a lot, even before he became the more sort of attacking player after coming back. So, but I also loved watching Gilchrist. So I don't know what it was that made me attached to certain players and not care. Ponting and Hayden batting, I had no interest in really, whereas Damien Martin batting, I would watch every ball.
Correct.
So why, I don't know. It was just fun.
Correct. Yeah, I think
Slater should have captured my imagination, but didn't really, in a way.
Look, Michael Clarke always said he was his hero. I do wonder if there were, because I know a lot of kids my age back in India who were huge Michael Slater fans. But I think it also went, like I said, with everything else, right? It was the way he played cricket. But for us, just Channel 9 commentary, the blue skies, like I mentioned, like even quirky things, if you were like quirky like me, about the stump mic and his footwork and all of that. So I guess that played a role. But just going back to the test match, so he makes 219. Chaminda Was has a back injury, so he's bowling, I think, off pace, and he's getting beaten up everywhere. Muralidharan, already there was question marks about the action, so the umpires are watching him closely. The one thing I did forget about this game, is, we remember it for Kizar Hayat getting the Ricky Ponting decision wrong, but there was also the huge ball tampering scandal, which I'd completely forgotten about, because Sri Lanka officially firstly became the first country to be accused of ball tampering during a test match as a team, and then the accusation was taken away. And I would and you were speaking about Mr. Peries being the president of the Board of Control for Cricket in Sri Lanka. I wonder if this happened during his period, because this is 90, could well have been the case. So that happens in the 17th over of Australia's innings, where it is Mutai Muralidharan of all people bowling, and the umpires Kizar Hayat and Peter Pocky Parker asked for the ball. They checked it. They said that the ball, they then reported to Graham Dowling, the match referee, that the ball had been tampered. And there was a big standoff. Arjuna Ranatunga was not happy. He walks up to them and says, if you think the ball was tampered, why don't you change the ball? But the umpires used the whole, no, we're not going to do it. But if you do it again, then we will we will change it again, which is a further accusation of almost going. And it kind of tells you where world cricket was and how Sri Lanka was viewed at that point, right? So in a week's time, the ball tampering thing was forgotten because, Daryl Hare and Muralidharan happened. But so this is, and the reports from there, Mike Coward's report I read, he smashed the ICC, and like the ICC have been getting smashed forever. People think that it's only now it's in vogue to bash the ICC, but the ICC have been bashed forever from the time they were around. And Mike Coward really took them down in his reporting, saying how can you do this to a team like Sri Lanka, where there's no precedent, you just didn't change the ball. And Graham Dowling has come out with this big report almost saying yes, there was ball tampering. The BCC SL were not happy at all. Dulip Mendes was team manager. He came out. So Sri Lanka do not do a press conference that day. Well, it sounds funny. There would have been a few journalists who we know pretty well from that era, the likes of Malcolm Corn and Andrew Ramsey, who might well have been there in Perth that day covering that test match, even Crash. So it'll be Greg Baum. We should ask them about what happens. So Sri Lanka don't send anyone for the press conference. They're super upset. And as Mike Coward wrote, anyway, you could not have figured out what had happened to the ball, because Michael Slater I think he hits 5 sixes, most of them of Muralidharan, and he just beaten the ball out of shape anyway. But so the ball tampering thing happens, and then the report, they are cleared of ball tampering a few days later. But as you can imagine, the damage was done. And I can imagine what it must have been like in Australia. A Sri Lankan team, and they toured before, maybe a couple of times before that for tests. I don't know what the excitement levels would have been like for a Sri Lankan team coming there. This is before Muralidharan obviously became Muralidharan. And to then have this little Sri Lankan team being accused of ball tampering, I'm sure a lot of Australian fans might have gone, well, not surprising. I do wonder what the reactions were like to that episode, because again, people generally remember the test match for the Michael Slater double 100, his highest score, which also I think his average peaked at that point was 49.43 or something, and I don't think it stayed there. That was it. That from that it just went down from there. So he makes a double 100. Obviously, Ricky Ponting's famous debut. Stuart Law's forgotten debut. Poor guy makes 54 not out. Never plays Test cricket again. And the fact that Sri Lanka became the first, because the Michael Atherton thing had happened that year, the dirt in his pocket, but that was one player, one captain. But this was an entire team being accused of it. And there was a lot of the ugliness had begun. I think with Ranatunga had bumped into Craig McDermott during the test match, and all sorts of drama was happening. Sri Lanka didn't do themselves any favors with the way they batted from all reports, and I do remember watching that. Shane Warne was again at his peak. But yeah, in the midst of all that, Michael Slater's highest score, and probably at that point, I remember thinking, he's going to make many more double hundreds. Maybe he could make 300 just the way he bats. But it wasn't to be. And I don't know, for the longest time, Michael Slater not making it in one-day cricket was always a big bugbear of mine. I would get very annoyed with the fact that why can't he make it? And I remember his last days as a one-day cricketer playing in the Titan Cup, the famous Titan Cup, India, Australia, South Africa, where he was batting number 5 and struggling against a young Harbhajan Singh. And Anyway, brings back a lot of memories. Maybe not Harbhajan Singh, it was still Kumble and co. But anyway, so there you go. Michael Slater, 219. I hope you learned to drive well, and I hope you haven't got too many demerit points since.
Andy Shaw, there you go. I'm pretty confident that'll be your 219 from the summer of 1995.
95.
Thereabouts. That was 219. Let's take a break. One more number to go. It is the final word. It's story time 216. I've got a number which comes in from Bubbles Hyder. Hello, Bubbles.
Ooh.
It is in pounds. It's 35.6, as in £35, 60 pence. Generous. Thank you, Bubbles.
Generous. Thanks, Bubbles.
Now, there's one little clue, one little short clue for this. My clue for my nerd pledge is bring it on Skippy. Right. Skippy. Now, this is important for you to know, Bharat, if you'll be doing your getting your citizenship formalised soon and all the rest of it. You need to know about Skippy. I assume you know that Skippy is a kangaroo.
Yes.
From the TV show.
Yeah.
You may not know that Skippy is also a peanut butter, but that's from the United States of America. Although Skippy brand peanut butter I used to see in Southeast Asia all the time. It's very sweet. It's too sugary. It's basically confectionery.
Not surprised.
Skippy, it's kind of a slur for Australians, for white Australians. There's like, if you're a skip, if someone calls you a skip, it's like it can only be that you're white, you're bland, you're boring, like you eat dull food. You know, if you go, that's real skippy behaviour. That's that kind of thing. I was wondering, maybe you can shed some light on it. The thing of it's a particularly an Indian supporter thing of referring to the Australian cricketers as kangaroos.
Oh God,
yes.
You
know, the kangaroos got beaten up today.
Yeah.
Sort of thing, which nobody here does. Like, it's not a thing. They're not the kangaroos.
Yeah, I think it comes from. I think most people who talk about the Australian cricket team in English don't refer to them as kangaroos. It's in in Hindi where they go kangaroo. So the kangaroo. So and I have a grouse here. Okay. So when I did that documentary with the group about the famous series, the one that I wrote a book on 2020, 2021. So I interviewed Tim Payne and I was part of it, Pat Cummins and all of us. So I wrote the script for it in English. But and then they then used someone to translate it into Hindi. So I've never seen the English version. And then they got like a Bollywood actor to read it out. So everywhere I'd written Australia, it's kangaroo. It's not even kangaroo. It's like, yeah. So the whole thing is kangaroon ne ye kiya or kangaroon ko maar pada. Like, so it's used in a slightly derogatory way, though not always. Like, yeah, but it allows them. So because they use kangaroo and not Australians always, it allows them to use it in a derogatory way when they want to. Like, for example, in that series when, say, Australia getting flogged or Australia losing, they're like, oh, kangaroo. Like, the kangaroos did not have any fight left in them or whatever. Like, It's,
it comes up all the time in
it does,
YouTube
it does.
comments.
It comes from... It comes. I mean, though having said that, there was when we played one of our matches this time, against the Sri Lankan media at Richmond College, where you played last time. There were all these little kids, like beautiful little Sri Lankan kids, like just egging us on and like chatting with us when I was feeling on the boundary. There's one kid in particular who spent at least, the entirety of the 20 overs or so we were on the field telling me how lions eat kangaroos. And like, he kept telling me that. And I kept telling him, like, I think most Australians do eat kangaroos as well. So probably it is not just in India. I'm sure the Pakistanis use it as well. But it comes up more in... when it's used in regional languages than in English, if that makes sense.
Also, like, sorry to burst your bubble here, buddy, but like, how often do you think a lion has met a kangaroo?
That's correct.
When have they come across each other? Like, a lion wouldn't know what the fuck to do with it.
They used
to. Yeah, they can eat like kudzu and okapi and whatever, antelope-based things. Suddenly there's this like jumping
thing. Yeah.
Super confusing. It'd be like,
it would be.
Trying to play football with a different code with a different shaped ball or something. Well,
there you go. Yeah.
It's like just things that wouldn't come together. I've always been intrigued by surf and turf, like the steak with prawns on the top. I'm like, when would a cow ever have met a prawn? in the wild.
Mm.
You know, when would their paths have crossed? if not at like the Cremorne RSL. That's
Yeah.
It's humans do some amazing things.
I mean, look, yeah, maybe there are some parts of the world where cows go surfing. I don't know. I could picture
like sea cows.
Yeah.
I suppose cows had to come out of the sea. I mean, there are the sea pigs in the Caribbean, those ones who like swim around among the islands. But I've never seen ocean-going cows. They may exist. Well, so the kangaroos thing. Lots of roo-based Australian sporting teams. To be fair, Socceroos. Terrible name, but we still have it. The Hockey Roos. They've got the Kookaburras are one team, but the Hockey Roos are the other. The Wallabies, the rugby team, is the Wallabies. The women's sevens rugby team is the Gillaroos for some reason. Now, this doesn't make any sense to me, right? So a wallaby is a kind of kangaroo.
Yes.
A Gillaroo is not a kind of kangaroo. A Gillaroo is a person, like a... I don't know if, again, this may be cultural learning that you need. So a jackaroo is somebody who works in the outback and like rounds up cattle and sheep and stuff like a drover. Yeah. And then once women started working that industry, they made that Gillaroos because it's feminizing Jack. Yeah. But it's still a person. And I enjoyed I found a theory that jackaroo actually came from vaquero in Spanish, which is a cowboy. Like a vaca is a cow in Spanish. So a vaquero is someone who, a cower, basically, someone who influences the cows. Yes. So then they're like, vaquero becomes buckaroo in sort of anglicized US speak. And then jackaroo comes from buckaroo. Anyway, I don't know. But Gillaroos, not a kind of kangaroo. I don't know if people are confused about that. The Matildas, the women's football team, a Matilda is a female kangaroo. The Boomers are the men's basketball team. A boomer is not just somebody with bad opinions on the internet. It's also a large male kangaroo. They had a softball team, or maybe they still do, which was called the Dingaroos for a while, which, I can get behind that. But never the cricket team. The cricket team has never been kangaroos. No. There is no nickname for the Australian cricket team, which I kind of like. It's like old-fashioned. It's got style about it. There's no nickname. There's no collective whatever. Yeah. So, which did make me wonder about, because there aren't many cricket teams who do. You've got the Proteas in South Africa. You've got the Black Caps, which is a terrible, boring name because they wear black caps. And Bangladesh have the Tigers. But I think they're the only ones, right? England, Australia, India, Pakistan, West Indies, Sri Lanka, Zimbabwe. None of them have a thing
not really.
That they are. Or Zimbabwe are the chevrons. You do get the chevrons.
They are the chevrons, but very, you have to be it's very niche to be called them. Yeah, they are the chevrons. But well, I mean, I've seen the maroons being used for the West Indies, which I find very odd. That's very wrong.
It's Queensland Rugby League.
Exactly. Yeah. So in some literature about them, but no, you're right.
So the Australians do have kangaroos on their hats. That's the national emblem. They also have emus on their hats. No one calls them the emus.
That's
but there's no... So all of this is a roundabout way of getting to Skippy, which is to say that there are no famous Australian athletes that I can think of called Skippy. You've got Snowy, you got Bluey, you got Mad Dog. You don't have Skippy. I did find online a character called Skippy the Cricket, who features, quote, in a collection of children's stories that uses the adventures of talking animals to illustrate the godly character traits that the Apostle Paul talks about in Galatians, known as the fruit of the Spirit. So there you go. You can go and look up the work of Skippy the Cricket if you want to, I don't know, teach your children about the lessons of the Apostle Paul. And whom amongst us does not want to do that?
That is correct.
So to find a cricketing nickname, it can't be in Australia because no one would do that. You have to go to New Zealand where things can be a bit more cringe when dealing with Australia, where Matthew Sinclair gets the nickname Skippy. I assume on a very original basis because he was born in Australia.
That's correct.
Would that seem right?
That is very, very true. I've actually interviewed him about it. Yeah, not about the nickname, but it did come up because there's a big... was it? Yeah, I'm trying to think. There was a big volcanic eruption or something where he was, and this got a very interesting backstory. I'll have to recall it. I met him because he did go AWOL for a while, where he wasn't seen on the circuit for a while. So when I was there in 2020, I drove all the way to Napier, and I found him, and yeah, it was not as interesting an interview that I thought it would be, and I never ended up writing it, but yeah, has to be. I can't think of any other reason why it would be called that apart from the fact that he was born here.
I think he was pretty down on cricket when he left, because he played for a long, long time, played into his late 30s domestically, couldn't really make a living out of it, and sort of probably felt in some ways like he'd wasted his time playing cricket for too long, and was finding it hard to get going in a life after cricket. So there was that struggle of adjustment, I suppose. But he is born in Australia, so he could have ended up as a frustrated Australian domestic player who didn't play Test cricket at all.
True.
His dad died when he was very young, so he ended up moving with his mum to New Zealand when he was 5 years old, I think it was. So he grows up in New Zealand largely. He gets into the Central Districts team just after he turns 20, and he has a couple of games there and then 3 decent seasons that follow that start. And he ends up in the New Zealand side, famously makes a double century on debut, one of the few to do that. I think it's still the highest debut score at first drop, because he was batting 3 in that side. And it's against a still pretty decent West Indies lineup before they've been beaten up by Australia in that whitewash. You mentioned Franklin Rose before. He was playing with Rion King and Courtney Walsh, so not a bad trio of quicks.
Not at all.
Less than a year later, makes 150 in South Africa against Alan Donald, Sean Pollock, Mackay Antini, Jacques Callis, Lance Klusner, Nicky Boye, which is, again, a pretty good calibre of bowlers. And then a few months later, so within the first 15 months of his Test career, another double 100 against Pakistan at home, facing Waqar Yunus, Mohammad Sami, Saqlain Mushtaq. So, great start. Seems to be all set up. And it does end up being quite a sad story in a lot of ways, in that basically he's never given any rope. So he has one bad series against Australia after that and gets dropped. Waits a couple of years, gets another brief stint, gets dropped. He comes back again, does okay against Australia in Brisbane, fails in Adelaide, gets dropped. So there's always this sense that he's not backed by the establishment. He gets weight of runs in domestic cricket. He gets back in the team. He gets a couple of tests, and then he's out again. And it contrasts with how consistent he is domestically. A lot of his seasons, he averages above 50. The ones where he doesn't, he averages 40, 39 at worst, basically, except for one season out of about 15, I think it is. But he explains it as having this sudden death feeling. Every time he gets recalled, it's like, I've got to make runs immediately, otherwise I'm going to be out. And so he's not in the mindset to do well, and often finds himself back out of the team quickly. So this happens all the way to the end of his career. At the end of his career, he gets brought back after a couple of years out of the side, plays one test in 2010, makes it, 30 or whatever it is, 20-something, gets dropped again. And I don't know, there's just this sense that he's not given the same support that other players would get. And I did find this interesting bit from Warren Lees, who was the New Zealand coach early in Sinclair's career and not later on, who talks about there's a contrast with a very settled in-group of mostly Canterbury players. And Warren Lees doesn't say that it was bullying, but the implication is effectively that it was. The quote is, all the jokes would have been at Sinclair's expense, and after a while that begins to hurt. So there's this sense that there are like the in players and the out players. And Central Districts is a very uncool team to come from in domestic terms. Probably hard to sell that there are particularly cool New Zealand domestic teams, but
True.
if you're from Canterbury, that's a power base. Stephen Fleming plays for Canterbury. Chris Cairns, Canterbury, Nathan Astle, Craig McMillan, Chris Martin, Shane Bond, they're all Canterbury. So that's where sort of the power base for New Zealand cricket is. But the relevant bit of this story, the 356 bit of this story, is when Sinclair is riding high after that early test burst. It's the middle of 2001, goes to England for a pro stint, not in county cricket, but in the Yorkshire County Premier League. So in classic leagues cricket style, like Sid Barnes, like Leary Constantine, like all of these overseas players in the past. Go get yourself a contract, get paid to hit some balls. This league got restructured out of existence in 2015. There were various versions of it dating back to 1936, so I'm not sure where things fall in terms of which stats count for which version, but I could find individual stats going back to 1980. And in that period, at least, in 1984, the league runs record for a season gets set by a young player called David Bias, who English listeners particularly might know. Long county career, most of it with Yorkshire.
Yeah.
He did quit and go and play for Lancashire for a bit, which is something that nobody does, basically. But and played for the best part of 2 decades in county cricket. But early in his career, a season where he turned 21 halfway through it, he made 1,394 runs, which was the record across a season in this league. So that's in 84. 2001, Skippy rocks up. I assume these must be based on some declarations once he hits milestones, because he makes exactly 200 in his first hit, exactly 100 in his second hit, exactly 100 in his third hit, and then he plays a cup match where he's 199 not out as he runs out of partners. So 4 tons, 3 of them in the league, 1 of them in the cup. Should have been 2 doubles had someone stayed with him to get another run. 599 runs in 4 innings. Right.
Wow.
It's unbelievable, this stuff. 2 games later, makes another double, 202.
Why not?
A couple of weeks later, makes 119 and then 71 back-to-back in 2 days in 2 games. And it's a little confusing in terms of what kind of match qualifies for what part of the season. But what I could tell you is that once he makes the 71, that takes him past 1,000 league runs before the end of June. And apparently that's never been done before. So he's tearing it up. He's going at a ridiculous pace, right? So I'm gonna assume this. At this point, when he goes past 1,000 runs, he finishes that innings on 1,039, right? Bring it on, Skippy. Can he get the record? The Nerd Pledge number was 356.
Yeah.
At that point, he's 356 runs short of the season record.
Oh,
right.
Wow.
This is my thesis. Bring it on, Skippy is that point where it's like this guy could obliterate this record.
Correct.
And then when he's primed to do it, he gets called up to the New Zealand one-day team. A few months earlier, he's done well in Sharjah, made a couple of hundreds in 3 hits in one-day cricket. So they want him to go to Sri Lanka to play the Coca-Cola Cup, one that I'm sure you remember well.
Yes.
Tri-series with India and Sri Lanka, all in Colombo at a couple of different grounds in Colombo.
A lot of rain.
I'm sure that Pi Peries was there.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Might have been running the joint.
Maybe with the members of the fairer sex there as well.
Maybe, just to brighten up the place.
Yeah, that's correct.
So that, I mean, fucking hell, that phrasing is just like when you want to go back in time and do things. I just want to lightly slap that guy. I just want to go back in time and just, not hard, just enough to be like, oi,
yeah,
cut it out. Anyway, so he goes to Sri Lanka to play in the one-day team and hardly makes a fucking run. Of course, he makes 1, 0, 21, 36, 1 and 3. They're trying to make the final. Sehwag monsters them, hits 160 balls.
When he becomes opener for the first time, that's right. Yeah. That's the innings that changed Indian ODI cricket in Sehwag's career, I remember. That's why when you said Coca-Cola Cup 2001, yep, that's exactly what came to mind. Yeah, there you go.
Right. And then, so that's before Sehwag's... Yeah, Sehwag hasn't opened in Test cricket before.
No.
That comes a couple of years later.
That comes,
3 years later.
2002 he opens, so so it all but this is the start. Actually, it's a lot like Rohit Sharma's career. Yeah, once he started opening in white ball cricket, and then Test cricket happened. But
then they give him the shot.
Yeah.
So that knocks out New Zealand. Skippy doesn't get back to Yorkshire until August. He misses all up across the season 9 league matches. And so in the end, he finishes with 1,195 runs at 64. It's the best average that year, but not the record aggregate. So he's 199 runs away, or basically 1 innings for him away from the top. And he's missed 9 games in that span, which could have taken him so far beyond the record the way that he was going. The little note for final word, deep cut enthusiasts, the best average the year before Skippy Sinclair was Big Dick Kettleborough for Sheffield College.
Oh, that's correct.
We were seeing them well that year.
Mm.
So that's it. I mean, I know it's niche, but I'm thinking the pledge
is.
came in pounds. So we've got an English perspective on the game. We've got Skippy. There's only one Skippy across all of cricket that I can think of. And the point when he needed to bring it on, he needed 356 more runs. So it might be a little bit tangential, but I'm going to give it a shot for Bubbles. Is that your 356? You can let us know if you want to play Nerd Pledge. Get involved. Do what a lot of people have done recently, a couple of hundred of them, and sign up. Join the Patreon, patreon.com/thefinalword. Put whatever number you want to send us in as your subscription amount. You can set your maximum for whatever you want it to be in a month. You have control. But you'll help us make this show. We're making Champions Trophy dailies purely because we've got the support from patrons to do that. We've got big tours coming up. We've got a big England summer. We've got India playing 5 tests there. We've got a Women's World Cup in September. We've got the Ashes at the end of the year. We've got a West Indies Caribbean tour with Australia going there for 3 tests where we'll be doubling up with the England summer. Oh, yes. On and on it goes. So we'd love to have your support. That's how we're able to do it. But story time is the most fun thing that we do. Send us a number so I can do things like find out about the history of Matthew Sinclair in the Yorkshire League.
Yeah, why not? Or learn about Omari Banks and Banky Banks. And
Banky Banks.
Yeah, and Banky Banks. Don't forget him, the legend himself. So, so this is a lot of fun. I think we went, and generally like we do, Jeff, we went all around the world from the little tiny island of Anguilla to Sri Lanka to Michael Slater and Kizar Hyatt and all the way to Matthew Sinclair in Yorkshire. So I think we did we skippied our way all around the block and also learned that driving at night in the Adelaide Hills, if you're just a learner, don't do it.
Yeah, let someone else drive you to the bottom, and then Adelaide has lots of nice, broad, well-lit, quiet streets. Just work it out on the squares, and then figure out the hills after that. All right, that's it. This is story time 216. Thank you, Bharat, for being on the show. Thanks to Maurice Blackburn and CBUS Super, NordVPN. All those links are in the show notes if you want to get your sweet deals on particular things. Bharat, give Isha a kiss for me. Pat the dogs for me. Enjoy your documentary viewing night at home with your family. Congratulations on having your story told so that now more elderly people will stop you in the street and say, do I recognize you?
Yeah, that's happened a few times this morning already. So no, bring it on. I love people of all ages. Are you the
nice man from the car wash?
Well, yeah, I'm very good at car washing. But anyway, thank you so much. No, I shall enjoy it. And I wait to hear your feedback.
Very good. All right, this has been Storytime. We've got more Champions Trophy dailies coming up, a weekly show later in the week with me and Adam. And on we go. We'll see you soon.